Good morning. Parliament is resumed. I invite the Honourable Member for West Bay Central to grace us with prayers.
Let us pray. Almighty God, from whom all wisdom and power are derived, we beseech Thee so to direct and prosper the deliberations of the Parliament now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and surest foundations for the glory of Thy name and for the safety, honour, and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our Sovereign, King Charles III, William, Prince of Wales, and all the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established among us. Especially we pray for the Governor of our islands, the Premier, the Speaker of the Parliament, the Leader of the Opposition, Ministers of the Cabinet, ex officio members, Members of Parliament, the Chief Justice and members of the Judiciary, that we may be enabled faithfully to perform the responsible duties of our high office. All this we ask for Thy great name's sake. Let us say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be Thy name. Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make His face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of His countenance upon us and give us peace, now and always. Amen.
Please be seated.
Administration of oaths or affirmations.
None.
Reading by the Honourable Speaker of messages and announcements.
None.
Presentation of petitions.
None.
Presentation of papers and of reports. The 2023-2024 Annual Report of the Standing Select Committee to oversee the performance of the Office of the Ombudsman, to be laid on the table by the Chairman of the Select Committee to oversee the performance of the Office of the Ombudsman, the elected member for West Bay North.
I recognize the Honourable Member for West Bay North.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to praise this report on the floor of the House on behalf of the Ombudsman's Oversight Committee.
On the table.
On the table.
So ordered. Does the Honourable Member wish to speak thereto?
Just to simply say that they like to pay compliments to the Ombudsman and her office. They've done a very hard job in spite of working conditions with mold and interference at times that will, I guess, in time be seen, but they've done a sterling job and they must be commended. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Questions to the Honourable Ministers and members of the Cabinet.
I have no answers.
Statements by the Honourable Ministers and members of the Cabinet.
I have approved a number of statements for delivery this morning. The Honourable Deputy Premier to begin.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not certain that the copies that are necessary as per the standing orders are available yet, as my team is trying to get them available. I don't know if you
Honourable Minister, perhaps you would give way then and
yes, sir.
Deal with some of the others first.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Border Control, Labour and Culture, supplementary funding for a new TP for Pirates Week.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to speak to the Cabinet approval given for supplementary funding of $200,000 under Section 11.5 of the Public Management Finance Act 2022 revision to resolve remaining payments related to the Pirates Week 2024 and the creation of a new TP 126, dedicated to spend related to Pirates Week 2024. Mr. Speaker, Pirates Week, initiated in 1977, has become a pivotal event in the Cayman Islands cultural and tourism calendar and offers a vibrant celebration of pirate legends and cultural heritage that has historically featured historical reenactments, music, parades, floats, local food, street dances, district celebrations, historical displays, friendly competition, and fireworks. Since 2022, the management of the festival has existed at the core government level, and this year, my team in the Ministry of Border Control, Labor and Culture has the pleasure and responsibility of delivering this important national festival. Despite Pirates Week being an annual event, budget funds were not transferred to the Ministry, Border Control, Labor and Culture for the express purpose. Supplementary information such as a full budget document, an event plan, and an established list of sponsors and vendors were also not provided. Therefore, my ministry team created this event essentially from scratch. In August, Cabinet approved $574,000 to TP 119 Community Development Initiatives for the delivery of Pirates Week 2024. This figure was calculated, the estimates acquired in the lines with a Grand Cayman schedule of Pirates Landing and launch event, local DJs and international performers, a drone show, district days in each district with local entertainment from November 11th to 15th, Pirates Week Grand Finale, local and overseas DJs, large international soca performers, and fireworks on Saturday, November 16th. Since that time, it was agreed to, in the interest of maximizing the cultural impact of Pirates Week, extend the November 9th international performers so that they would perform in every district and to extend the fireworks show to every district day. Additionally, the cost of the drone show was more than initially estimated, and there were some additional infrastructure-related costs as a result of the poor weather conditions occurring during that time. These additional costs are primary contributors to the need for supplementary funding required to remedy the overage outlined herein. While the initial request was made for Pirates Week 2024, funding will be inserted into TP 119. An examination of the execution of Pirates Week identified it to be a standalone event that is separate and apart from community development, which monies under TP 119 are earmarked for. Cabinet therefore agreed earlier this month to create a new TP, TP 126, dedicated to the delivery of Pirates Week 2024. The initial budget allocation was transferred retroactively from TP 19 to TP 126, and a request for supplementary funds was requested in TP 126. Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet found it necessary to favorably consider this request for supplementary funding because it was agreed that this need facilitated an exceptional circumstance. As previously mentioned, the Ministry of Responsibility of Culture did not receive funding allocated for this critical national festival, nor did it receive human capital allocated for event delivery. Budget documents, existing contracts establishing pre-agreed costs, existing sponsorship agreements, or guidance documents on the execution of the event. Additionally, culture-related expenditures are pivotal in the government strategy to promote national heritage and arts and culture activities in this critical time where national identity is often being watered down, overlooked, or outright forgotten. it was imperative to deliver a cultural celebration that reinvigorated our people's love for a national festival and our connections to our heritage. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, it is evident that this request for supplementary funding and the creation of TP 126 was necessary in order to deliver a national festival that provided an economic boost while simultaneously promoted local pride and developed community spirit. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Deputy Premier, I understand your statements have arrived. The copies of your statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a statement in accordance with Section 11(6) of the Public Management and Finance Act in relation to Section 11(5) appropriations during the year of 2023 fiscal year. Mr. Speaker, EA 164 Central Scranton Park was increased by $1.5 million in order to assist with the construction of entrances and landscaping and multipurpose court and bathroom block, fencing, and roadway in the neighborhood and parking lot for Central Scranton Park. The increase was funded by a similar decrease in TP 67 Sports and Cultural Tourism Programs assistance. The appropriation TP 12 Tourism Scholarship was increased by $170,000, and the appropriation TP 13 Miss Cayman Scholarship was increased by $25,000 in order to fund scholarships previously awarded and being assessed in 2024. These increases were funded by a decrease in the appropriation DAT 17 Tourism Support, Training and Promotional Advertising Activities in the amount of $195,000. Mr. Speaker, TP 67 Sports and Cultural Tourism Programs was increased by $150,000 in order to assist with an increased demand for support for sports and cultural tourism programs. This increase was funded by a decrease in TP 80 support for business and initiatives in the same amount. For fiscal year 2025, Mr. Speaker, DAT Tourism Support Training and Promotional and Advertising Activities was increased by $2 million, as said in this Honorable House before, in order to assist with key marketing initiatives and product development activities. During the fiscal year of 2024, Cabinet approved $2 million via Section 95 of the Public Management and Finance Act be brought forward from fiscal year 2025 to fiscal year 2024. This funding was utilized for key marketing initiatives in the United States, Canada, and UK and Europe, and key product development initiatives in the Cayman Islands. This increase in funding seeks to replace the funding in the fiscal year 2025 that was brought forward to fiscal year 2024. The appropriation EA 164 for Central Scranton Park was increased by $1.9 million in order to assist with the construction of entrances and landscaping and community center and multipurpose court and bathroom block, fencing and roadway and parking lot for Central Scranton. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Youth, Sports and Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to provide further details on the Youth, Sports and Heritage requests for supplementary transfer of funds for the 2024 financial year in accordance with Section 11(5) and 9(5) of the Public Management and Finance Law 2020 revision. Mr. Speaker, in the 2024 financial year, Cabinet was asked to consider two transfer of funds. The first was to cover the 5% cost of living adjustment and honorarium for one of our entities, specifically the National Gallery of the Cayman Islands. The second was the transfer of funds from the 2025 financial budget to 2024 due to unanticipated expenditure needs incurred during the Emancipation Day celebrations as well as increased interest in community grants for youth, sports, and heritage activities. Now, regarding the 5% cost of living adjustment and honorarium for the National Gallery, Mr. Speaker, you may recall that in October 2024, a statement was given by the acting Deputy Governor in this House regarding the 5% COLA, which is scheduled to take effect from January 1st, 2025. Additionally, in November 24, the Honorable Premier announced a one-time honorarium payment for the civil service and the broader public service. As part of this extension, it is expected that statutory authorities and government companies would also receive the same benefits. However, the National Gallery of the Cayman Islands informed us that following the announcements, they did not have the available funding to implement the honorarium for 2024 or the COLA for 2025. The Board of Directors for the National Gallery wished to award the honorarium, the 2024 honorarium, and the COLA increase to the staff in alignment with CIG, but was unable to find these funds within the existing budget or allocations without impacting programs through a reduction in personnel, such as the school tour program, which provides free cross-curricular and heritage-based learning tours for all local schools. After schools art clubs, which supports 100 children per week for free arts programming. Sister Islands programming due to reduction in travel budgets and personnel. Traveling exhibition program. The Minister of Youth, Sports and Heritage was unable to find the funding within the current allocations for 2024. And as a result, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Youth, Sports and Heritage sought support from our sister Ministry of Home Affairs. Through the funding available in HAF1, approval was given to reallocate $56,000 from HAF1 to NGCI in accordance with Section 11.5 of the Public Management and Finance Act 2020 revision, thereby assisting in the funding. Mr. Speaker, it was crucial for this government to honor its commitment to the wider public service and support entities that contribute to the preservation and awareness of our arts and culture. As the country's leading public visual arts organization dedicated to collecting and exhibiting works of our local artisans, it was important to acknowledge the invaluable work of the National Gallery and its staff. This honorarium and the COLA extensions were in line with the benefits afforded to other statutory authorities and government companies. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank this government for considering and approving this transfer of funds, ensuring that the National Gallery receives the recognition and support it deserves. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Youth, Sports and Heritage had also requested Cabinet for the transfer of funds from 2025 budget to the 2024 budget in accordance with Section 9.5 of the Public Management and Finance Act 2020 revision. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Heritage plays a key role in shaping the future of the nation by investing in youth, developing athletes, and preserving Caymanian heritage. As we approach the end of 2024, we anticipate a projected shortfall of $350,000 due to vital and unanticipated expenditures that reflected the dynamic nature of the Ministry's work and a responsive approach to the community needs. Notably, two key initiatives have contributed to these additional costs: the successful reinstatement of Emancipation Day events in both Grand Cayman and Cayman Brac after 62 years, and the launch of the Ministry's grants process. This initiative has brought immense value by fostering national pride, reconnecting the community with its history, and supporting essential projects in youth development, sports, and heritage preservation. The outcome of these efforts will continue to benefit the Caymanian community for years to come. For this reason, the Ministry sought a transfer of funds from the 2025 financial year to 2024 to meet all obligations for the remaining of the 2024 year. In closing, Mr. Speaker and members of this Honourable House, I have explained the exceptional circumstances that made it necessary to approve the supplementary appropriations for the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Heritage in the 2024 financial year. With the approval of these transfers, the government was able to effectively address unforeseen expenditures and ensure the successful continuation of key initiatives for these important subject areas. Mr. Speaker, I would like to express my gratitude to this Honourable House for considering and approving these necessary transfers and for supporting the Ministry in fulfilling its mandate to shape a brighter future for our people, protect our heritage, and nurture the potential of our youth. I thank you all for your indulgence as the Ministry continues to work with its agencies to deliver essential services to the people of the Cayman Islands as we remain dedicated to improving the lives of those that we serve. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Border Control and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Speaker, like many other developed nations, the Cayman Islands faces a range of migration challenges. People relocate here for various reasons, seeking economic opportunities, pursuing education, reuniting with families, or fleeing conflicts and human rights violations. These global trends emphasize the need for a responsive and adaptive immigration framework. To this end, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Border Control, Labour and Culture has been diligently working on amending the Immigration Transition Act 2022 revision since Cabinet gave approval in May 2024 for drafting to begin. And the proposed amendments included the Immigration Transition Discussion White Paper. The discussion white paper can be grouped by the following themes: revenue generating measures, work permit reforms, residency and employment rights certificate amendments, right to be Caymanian status, information sharing enhancements, definition and policy updates, pending miscellaneous amendments. Mr. Speaker, immigration plays a crucial role in the Cayman Islands. The global context of immigration plays a significant role in shaping the economy, the economic, social, and cultural landscapes of many countries worldwide. For the Cayman Islands, with a population of about 85,000, and more than 60% of that population being expatriates, immigration has been central to our socioeconomic fabric. Our expatriate community contributes greatly to key sectors such as finance, tourism, and construction, fueling economic growth and helping to build a thriving economy. Mr. Speaker, while the islands have experienced many benefits from the immigration of persons to our shores, it also continues to cause various challenges and concerns. While immigration has brought about economic benefit, it also presents certain challenges. One such challenge is social integration. The size of the expatriate community in relation to the local population can lead to misunderstandings of tensions between Caymanians and expatriates. Some members of our local population are understandably concerned about preserving our cultural heritage and national identity as we witness a growing presence of foreign workers. It is essential to address these concerns with sensitivity. When determining the rate at which the population should grow due to immigration, governments must carefully consider the capacity and condition of existing infrastructure including transportation systems, healthcare facilities, schools, housing, and utilities play a crucial role in maintaining a high quality of life for both existing residents and newcomers. Mr. Speaker, our government must ensure that our island's infrastructure can handle the increased demand brought on to us by a growing population. This includes assessing whether current systems can support additional people without overburdening them, and whether new investments is needed to expand or upgrade facilities and services. Failing to account for the pressures on the infrastructure can lead to overcrowding schools, traffic congestion, insufficient health care services, and housing shortages, all of which can undermine social stability and economic growth. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, the government hope is that by extending the time that persons have to wait before qualifying to apply for Cayman status, this will allow the government additional time to plan and decide what further changes, if any, need to be made to the framework in the Immigration Transition Act in order to deal with the shifting needs of a growing population. The government needs to ensure that the needs of both the existing residents and expatriates are met, while ensuring that our immigration legislation evolves to strike a balance between effective migration management and the protection of Caymanians' interests, so that both newcomers and existing residents have access to the necessary resources and services for a prosperous and healthy life. As such, Mr. Speaker, the government is asking the public to participate in the public consultation being conducted on the Immigration Transition Discussion White Paper until March 3rd, 2025. This discussion white paper reflects months of careful review, collaboration, and research to address some of the challenges and opportunities within our immigration system. It outlines a range of proposals that are designed to enhance fairness and alignment with some of our priorities. As Minister responsible for border control matters, I firmly believe that policies shaping the future of immigration system must reflect the experiences and insights of our community. That is why public consultation is not just a formality, but a crucial part of the process. Immigration impacts every corner of our society, from the strength of our workforce to the vibrancy of our communities. Hence, your perspectives will help ensure that we craft policies that are balanced, inclusive, and grounded in realities of those who live and work here. This process is about working together to create an immigration system that meets our current needs while preparing for the future. The government hopes to obtain useful feedback on the proposed amendments to the current Immigration Transition Act. As we look forward to the future, Mr. Speaker, we remain steadfast in our commitment to serving the Cayman Islands and its people, and I'm honored and blessed to be the minister with responsibility for this ministry, and I'm eager to continue to work with the team to ensure that the immigration legislation is fit for purpose while safeguarding the interests of Caymanians. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take the time to thank those in the ministry who worked so hard over the last couple of months in preparing this white paper discussion. And in particular, I'd like to point out Senior Policy Officer, Ms. Rolna Da Costa, and Ms. Danielle, Deputy Chief Officer. Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Personal explanations,
None.
obituary and other ceremonial speeches,
None.
raising of matters of privileges,
None.
government business. Bills, second readings. Referendum, Cruise Berthing, Infrastructure, Gambling and Cannabis Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Tourism and Ports.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the second reading of a bill, long title of which is described as the bill for an act to provide for the holding of a referendum on the proposal to develop cruise berthing infrastructure, to provide for the holding of a referendum on the proposal to legalize gambling in the form of national lottery, to provide for the holding of a referendum on the proposal to decriminalize the consumption and possession of small amounts of cannabis and for incidental and connected purposes.
The second reading of the bill has been duly moved. Does the Honourable Minister wish to speak thereto?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity as I rise to present on behalf of the government this landmark piece of legislation which is designed to give the people of this country the power to decide on three significant matters of national importance. Namely, 1, whether to develop cruise berthing infrastructure, 2, whether to legalize a national lottery, and 3, whether the consumption and possession of small amounts of cannabis should be decriminalized. Mr. Speaker, these issues are critical not only to our economy and society, but also to the fundamental principles of democracy and self-determination. Consequently, the intention of the bill is clear, Mr. Speaker. It is to empower the electorate by including them in the decision-making process on issues that will directly affect their lives and their future. As you may be aware, Mr. Speaker, the people's right to participate in referendums on matters of national importance is enshrined in Section 69 of our Cayman Islands Constitution. This bill, therefore, is not just about the three issues, as I've just described, but more importantly, Mr. Speaker, it's about ensuring that the voice of our people is heard, respected, and acted upon. While it is true that all of us in this honorable House have been duly elected to represent our constituencies, and we have been entrusted by the people to make day-to-day decisions on their behalf, the question could be asked, why do we need to have a referendum at all? Why not just let us, as representatives, to make the decision? Those are legitimate questions, Mr. Speaker. And the answer is that referendums provide a powerful mechanism for the electorate to directly engage on critical issues that transcend party politics and legislative agendas. Engaging in this form of direct democracy cultivates a sense of ownership and accountability among the voters, reinforcing the principles that the power ultimately rests in the hands of the people. Mr. Speaker, I'd love to add that the referendum is also a tool and instrument of consultation, as we always speak about that process. Referendums are also vital in strengthening the democratic process by encouraging public debate and engagement. They compel governments and citizens alike to articulate and examine the implications and the consequences of life-altering issues in order to make informed decisions. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, when people feel their voices genuinely influence the trajectory of their nation, it fosters a deeper sense of belonging and commitment to the democratic process, underscoring the shared responsibility that we all have in collectively shaping the future of our beautiful Cayman Islands. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the history books are filled with examples of citizens doing exactly that, shaping the future of their country by referendum. Who in here can forget the Brexit referendum in 2016, where the people of the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union. That decision not only reshaped the UK's political and economic relationship with Europe, but also demonstrated that the electorate's power to influence a matter of national importance. In 2014, the Scottish independence referendum is another example of direct public participation in deciding a nation's future. In that instance, while the majority ultimately chose to remain with the United Kingdom rather than becoming an independent country, that referendum process allowed the Scottish people to engage in meaningful debate about their own sovereignty, and self-determination. Referendums are not limited to the UK, though, Mr. Speaker, nor are they only held on matters of sovereignty. The South African referendum in 1992 marked a watershed moment in the nation's history as white South Africans voted overwhelmingly to dismantle apartheid and transition towards a multiracial democracy, ending years of institutionalized segregation. Mr. Speaker, these are just a few examples which highlight the profound role that referendums play in the democratic process. It is a tool to help us in our leadership when there is controversial topics to be decided on. And I firmly believe that Caymanians want and deserve the same rights and opportunities that the people of the United Kingdom, Scotland, and South Africa were afforded to express their will through the referendum process. And frankly, Mr. Speaker, I'm at loss to understand why any elected representative in this Parliament would want to deny them that right and that opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I will speak to the 3 referendum questions later in my contributions, but first I would like to specifically address why the government is committed to this referendum process. Mr. Speaker, it is obvious that the government is bringing this bill because we are in support of each one of the questions. I use the word obvious based on the fact that the 3 questions contained in the bill have all been previously approved by motions within this Parliament, as per the constitutional requirements. You may recall that the cruise berthing question was approved under the construction of the previous government, which at that time included the elected members who now sit in opposition. And Mr. Speaker, these members are the members of West Bay Central, the members of West Bay South, the member for Prospect, and the member for Savannah. While the questions on the national lottery and decriminalization of cannabis were approved under the administration led by the former Premier and member for Newlands, the Honourable Wayne Panton. With that said, Mr. Speaker, there is no need to debate the issues in depth again, because everything that was said during the presentation on those motions by members on both sides of this House is a matter of public record. But what I will say, Mr. Speaker, this bill is more than just a piece of legislation. It is a promise to our people that their voices are valued in guiding future decisions. In bringing this bill, this government is doing the best to ensure that those future decisions are made not in back rooms or in isolation, but in full view of and with the participation of the people that we have been elected to serve. Irrespective of our numbers, this government remains keenly aware that we operate within the principles of democracy. And it is our assessment that the three topics proposed for the referendum meet the threshold of national importance and therefore require input from the electorate to determine the ways forward. While we recognize that the results of the referendum are non-binding, we also believe that once the people have had their say, the results will help guide the next administration on these sensitive areas, and that any subsequent actions can be taken in confidence, grounded by the people and their voice being shown. Mr. Speaker, with your indulgence, I will now summarize for this House the main provisions of the bill which seek to give effect to its purpose. The bill is arranged in 11 clauses and contains 2 schedules, which I will explain in straightforward terms for the benefit of the listening public. Mr. Speaker, as is customary, Clause 1 provides a short title for the legislation, allowing for it to be known as the Referendum, Cruise Berthing Infrastructure, Gambling and Cannabis Act 2024. Clause 2 defines the key terms used in the bill, such as referendum, observer, and scrutineer, to ensure that there's no ambiguity about the meaning of any of these terms when the law is applied. For the purpose of this act, the terms deputy supervisor, elections, electoral district, presiding officer, returning officer, and supervisor all have the same meaning, respectively, as in the Elections Act. Clause 3 deals with the holding of the referendum and stipulates that it must be held on matters specified in Clause 4.1 of the bill, with each elector being entitled to cast 1 vote. In this instance, given that there will be 3 questions on the referendum ballot paper, voters will be entitled to cast 1 vote for each question. So 3 questions, 3 votes. It is also established within the section of the bill that Cabinet must publish a notice of the referendum date at least 30 days before it is held, giving the public significant time to prepare. And I will be speaking more on the term, time to prepare, later in my contribution, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Clause 4, entitled Matters of National Importance and Referendum Questions, can be best described as the focal point of this bill, because it refers to the most important aspects of the referendum itself, which are the issues of national importance. And Clause 4, subsection 1, lists these are as A, whether the islands should develop cruise berthing infrastructure to support the tourism industry. B, whether a national lottery should be legalized in the islands. And C, whether the consumption and possession of small amounts of cannabis should be decriminalized. However, Mr. Speaker, for the purposes of definitively determining the people's response to the matters of national importance, the questions would be posed at the referendum in this form. Question 1, should the Cayman Islands develop cruise berthing infrastructure? Question 2, do you support the introduction of a national lottery in the islands? Question 3, do you support the decriminalization of the consumption and possession of small amounts of cannabis? Having listed the questions, the clauses also stipulate that the ballot paper used in the referendum must be included in Schedule 1, which forms part of the bill. Clause 5 of the bill, listed as entitlement to vote, specifies that only those persons who are registered voters on the day of the referendum will be entitled to cast their vote. This is to ensure fairness and consistency in the electoral process. As a side, Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity to recognize and give credit to the Supervisor of Elections, Mr. Wesley Howell, and the Elections Office staff for extending the voter registration deadline earlier last month to the 15th of January 2025. And I also understand that they extended their opening hours to 7 p.m. in efforts to accommodate as many people as possible to take part in this referendum and election. This gave unregistered persons additional time to get their voters list, to get on the voters list, which I understand now includes 25,687 registered voters and represents one of the largest increases in the electoral roll that we've seen in some time. That's a good sign, Mr. Speaker. I am happy to see that so many of our citizens have taken the opportunity to exercise their democratic right to vote in the upcoming elections. Moving on, Mr. Speaker, to Clause 6, Conduct of Referendum. This section of the bill outlines how the referendum process will take place. It designates roles for various elections officials, such as the supervisor and the returning officer, whose responsibility it is to oversee the voting process, count the votes, certify the ballot papers, and basically ensure that the voting process is conducted in an accurate, transparent, and professional manner. Mr. Speaker, transparency is critical in an election process, and Clause 7, which details with the subject matter of observers, allows Her Excellency, the Governor, to appoint observers to monitor not just the referendum process, but also the verification of ballots and voting count. Additionally, under Clause 7, the Premier and the Leader of Opposition each have the authority to appoint 2 persons at each polling station and each counting station, again to monitor the referendum process and the counting of the votes. These observers will ensure transparency, accuracy, and integrity is maintained within the process itself, as well as the counting of the ballots. Mr. Speaker, Clause 8, which lists legal challenges, is another important section in the bill because it establishes the procedures for questioning the results of the referendum, ensuring that any disputes about the referendum results are handled promptly through the appropriate legal channels. Specifically, it allows for judicial review under strict conditions to avoid frivolous disputes while safeguarding the legitimacy of the process. In essence, Clause 8 explains how and when a court can review the results of the referendum and contains 3 subsections, which I will paraphrase to simplify the legal terminology. Subsection 1 speaks to the fact that challenges to the referendum results can only happen in specific circumstances. This means that the court cannot hear cases questioning the number of votes or the ballot papers unless the process for bringing the challenges is followed exactly as outlined in the section. Clause 8, subsection 2, affirms that the challenges must be made through judicial review, meaning that any person who wishes to question the results must file a claim in Grand Court, and they must do so within a specific time frame called the permitted period. Subsection 3 established that the permitted period is 6 weeks, which starts either on the date the supervisor officially certifies the results, or if there are multiple certifications on the date of the final certification. So, for example, Mr. Speaker, if they give the results of the first two questions today, and they give the third result of the third question tomorrow, it would be the date starting 6 weeks as of the last certification. Mr. Speaker, Clause 9, which speaks to the Application of Elections Act, is intended to ensure consistency by certifying that the referendum will follow established election procedures with a few necessary modifications which are in keeping with the context of a referendum. And these are as follows, Mr. Speaker. Subsection 1 explains that the referendum will be conducted as if it were an election of members of Parliament, except that the terms candidate, nomination, agent, election agent, polling agent, and counting agent shall not be used unless required in a specific context. Notwithstanding the provisions outlined in subsection 1, subsection 2 allows for the parts of the Elections Act listed in column 1 of Schedule 2 to apply to the referendum with the modifications or exceptions that are also detailed in Schedule 2. Clause 9, subsection 2 speaks to adjustments in terminology, Mr. Speaker, allowing for the terms used in the Elections Act to be more appropriately interpreted to fit the context of the referendum. Consequently, Mr. Speaker, A, any reference to election or poll shall be understood as referring to the referendum. B, any reference to electoral district shall be interpreted as referring to the area under responsibility of the relevant returning officer. C, any reference to polling day shall be understood to mean the day that the referendum is held. And D, any reference to a ballot paper shall be construed as referring to the referendum ballot paper. It should be noted, Mr. Speaker, that Cabinet has the authority to amend the provision in Schedule 2 if necessary and appropriate. Mr. Speaker, Clause 10 makes provision for the costs associated with holding the referendum, as well as any payments and travel allowances due to the officers to be covered by the general revenue of this country. This ensures that adequate resources are allocated to deliver a transparent and fair referendum process. The final clause in the bill, Clause 11, empowers Cabinet to make additional regulations as deemed necessary for the effective conduct of the referendum, as well as any other matters which may arise and are required to fulfill the purpose of this Act. Mr. Speaker, the bill also includes two schedules, the first of which is a copy of the ballot paper that voters will use to cast their vote. It contains 3 referendum questions with yes and no below each question, with space for the voters to respond. Schedule 2, entitled Application of Electors Act, lists each of the specific provisions within the Elections Act 2022 revision that will apply to the referendum, noting the required modifications and omissions. For example, Mr. Speaker, Section 20 of the Elections Act speaks to electors' registration cards. The modification required in this instance, in the context of a referendum, is that the reference to electors' card, registration card, has been omitted. Similarly, Mr. Speaker, Part 3 of the Elections Act refers to the registration of political parties, and this too has been omitted, Mr. Speaker, as in the context of a referendum, the registration of a political party is unnecessary. The final example, Mr. Speaker, I will cite from this section of the bill as it pertains to Section 28 of the Elections Act, which refers to the issue of writs for holding elections, that it references has been omitted. Those references have been omitted and is replaced with the appropriate substitution to suit the nature of the referendum as opposed to an election. Mr. Speaker, just making sure the relevant amendments are suited for the referendum compared to that of a general election. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to move now to matters of national importance number 1. Earlier, you may have heard me say in my contributions that I would not rehash the debate that have previously occurred in this Parliament regarding the 3 subjects of national importance contained in this bill. But I feel obligated, Mr. Speaker, at the very least, to briefly summarize the government's position on these issues. As the Minister with responsibility for tourism, ports, social development, and innovation, the referendum questions are directly associated to areas within my remit. I believe that my constituents and the public at large deserve to know where I stand, and I'm happy to tell them that, Mr. Speaker. It should come as no surprise to anyone within the sound of my voice that for years, the cruise sector has been the backbone of our economy. It's also the filter to stay over. It has provided jobs for thousands of Caymanians, supported hundreds of small and micro businesses, and has helped to provide us all with a good standard of living. Yet as we speak, this vital industry is diminishing at a rapid rate, Mr. Speaker. The decline in cruise calls is not just a random number. It is a growing crisis, Mr. Speaker, that is adversely affecting the people that we know, that we love, and that we live with every day. To illustrate, Mr. Speaker, I will share our cruise passenger arrivals for 2024 so that members can fully appreciate the seriousness of the situation. Between January and December of last year, passenger arrivals topped out at 1,075,875 persons, which is 194,106 people less than the year before in 2023. And this reflects a reduction of over 15.3% over the previous year. In 12 months, 15% drop. To put it into perspective, Mr. Speaker, given the current circumstances that we saw coming, we reduced our forecast because we had it at 1.2 first. And we reduced it to 1.1 million passengers for last year, 2024, which was 100,000 passengers below our previous arrivals in 2023. But, Mr. Speaker, we actually lost almost double that. We didn't lose 100,000 after predicting the fallout of having no cruise infrastructure. We actually lost double to the amount of 194,000. And believe it or not, 194,000 people spending money in businesses in this country means a lot to a lot of Caymanians to survive. Passenger arrivals in 2024 were down for 8 consecutive months in a row. And the Economic and Statistics Office, in their report released in October of last year, stated that the downward trend is expected to continue at a rate of 5.2% annually going forward. So there's no happy days for those who depend on cruise. They are worried, they are scared, and they don't know what to do. The harsh reality is our cruise industry is going down before our very eyes as we speak. cruise lines are making preparation. Last year, there were 52 less cruise calls in Georgetown than the year before, totaling only to 355 for the year. Mr. Speaker, the longer that we refuse to provide piers to service the newer, larger ships that are now sailing the Caribbean seas, the more we will see our fellow Caymanians who work within this industry losing their incomes, businesses closing their doors, and the very fabric of our society starting to erode around us. Mr. Speaker, that scenario is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Because we know that it's only a matter of time before the smaller ships that are currently calling on Georgetown are replaced by larger ships. Mr. Speaker, a lot of people don't sometimes understand, and I know it's not part of their everyday life, so they wouldn't get it. But every ship that is built has a life cycle. And those that are calling on here will eventually come to their retirement time. And the owners, the CEOs, the money people said, we ain't building them small like that anymore. So when they come to the end of their cycle, they ain't coming back to Grand Cayman. And when that transition occurs, Mr. Speaker, as it already has for several of the major cruise lines, and why our numbers are currently going down, we also know that the newer ships will only be calling on destinations that wisely invest in their own cruise tourism industry. And I say wisely, Mr. Speaker, because the cruise lines have told us over and over that this time is coming. But whether for arrogance or ignorance or whatever reason, we choose to ignore it. And I'm worried, Mr. Speaker. I'm worried. We are refusing to adhere, not to their advice, not like they're giving us some help. They're just stating a fact. Many felt that these cruise lines must come to the Cayman Islands because, after all, we are the jewel of the Caribbean, and we believe that the industry will collapse around us if they don't come to the Cayman Islands. Well, let me tell you this. I've been to the Caribbean on behalf of you, members of Parliament, and the good people of this country. Trust me, they got some other pretty islands out there. And the water is just as crystal clear, and the sand is just as white. So if we think that we're the only lady on the block, we can think again. But it is our industry that is collapsing, not their industry, because their industry is growing. While we're thinking that, oh, they can't do without us, they said, oh, yeah, we'll show you. And cruise tourism is increasing across the Caribbean, while Cayman's cruise tourism is decreasing at the rate of loss of jobs, loss of business, loss of economic opportunities. While we insist on keeping our heads buried in the sand, I know that there's people who have genuine concerns, but we can get past them, Mr. Speaker. We can. But I think there's people who have agendas. That's what this is about. But anyway, we'll get on to that shortly. As it stands, if the Cayman Islands has any hope of remaining as a cruise tourism destination, we must be willing to adapt to the new realities and demands of the rapidly changing industry. I know we don't like to be told what to do, but it's a simple reality of a business called cruise that we've decided tens of decades ago, from in the early 60s, if I remember, the first time a cruise ship came here, we decided to get in this industry then, and the industry is changing. And it's adapting, and if we don't adapt with it, just like how we come in here and we adapt all the legislation for financial services. Oh, the financial services, yes, we love them. They bring a lot, and we adapt every day. A new bill come down here to adapt to the financial services. But now we have to adapt the cruise we don't want to do that? Is it because only the poorer class Caymanians are in cruise? Is that what it is? As we used to boast about being the only destination without peers for a long time, with our stubbornness and procrastination have now cost us dearly. From 2019 at 1.9 million cruise passengers, now down to 1.1, almost a 50% drop. Yeah. And if we don't do something about it, it's going to get worse. To be fair, Mr. Speaker, our refusal to move with the times wasn't just about vanity. For years, concerns about the environmental impact on peers dominated the conversation, and rightfully so. By no means, anybody who brings up about the environment has a right to do so, because I want the environment protected as well. Because protecting our natural heritage is a duty that must be taken seriously. But the question that we must now ask ourselves is whether we have taken that duty a step too far. And are they using that duty as an excuse for another ulterior motive? Without truly and honestly weighing the environmental concerns against the socio-economic ruins that lies ahead. Let us consider for a moment, Mr. Speaker, the future of the Cayman Islands without a vibrant cruise tourism industry. Thousands of jobs tied to this sector will vanish. Jobs that pay mortgages, send children to school, put food on tables, and small businesses that rely on that steady flow of passengers, tour operators, craft market vendors, taxi drivers, attractions will struggle to stay open. Unemployment will rise, and so too will the social issues like crime, homelessness, because somebody going to lose their house if they can't pay their bills. Because the banks don't play, they're coming for you. And the economic picture is going to be terrible. And let us not forget, Mr. Speaker, the knock-on effect it will have to the government revenue. For the 12-month period ending the 31st of December of last year, the government is forecasted to collect $7.1 million, which is $1 million less than the 2024 budgeted amount of $8.1 million. So our projections were off by $1 million. Thank God for stayover that my good team in DOT and Director Rosa Harris got the opportunity to bring that $2 million forward from this year to last year to put some extra fight in the game, even with the difficulties of the hurricane season, that we were able to make up the loss and ended up getting $3 million more than we projected. So even though we lost $1 million in our projections, we made up for it later on. With less revenue from cruise tourism, Mr. Speaker, there will be fewer funds to invest in schools, hospitals, roads, and other public infrastructure. The ripple effect will touch every corner of our society and, dare I say, even rattle the gates of the gated communities of this country. And it's not a pretty picture we're going to see. Despite seeing the writing on the wall and the warning of the cruise lines coming to pass, are we still going to procrastinate? Because it's not all lost yet. We still have this opportunity, and that's why this bill is here today. The unfortunate thing, Mr. Speaker, the longer that we wait, the more time we lose. Till it gets to a point where we are so far behind where the industry needs us to be that it isn't possible to catch up. Because when cruise lines move on, they only have so many stops they can do. And if they find somewhere else, it may take a whole lot more than a cruise pair to get them to come back. This is why I must stress, Mr. Speaker, that a yes vote in the referendum does not mean that pairs will magically appear overnight. It will take time, plenty of time, Mr. Speaker, before we will be anywhere near the start of construction of a cruise pair. A yes vote simply gives the government, the next administration, the mandate to move forward responsibly and transparently to explore viable options and begin the discussions with potential partners and stakeholders. It gives the next administration the confidence to invest in the necessary studies, looking at engineering and architectural plans, and explore the best environmental safeguards without fearing that millions of dollars could be wasted if the process gets derailed again at the 11th hour. A yes vote simply means taking decisive steps now, Mr. Speaker, in order to secure and sustain the future of our cruise tourism industry. On the other hand, Mr. Speaker, a no vote means that we must brace for a very uncertain future. It means preparing for the loss of an entire sector of our economy, while scrambling to find alternative ways to provide employment and generate the revenue that the cruise tourism brings. Can we afford that risk, Mr. Speaker? I ask any member of this House, can we afford that? Because the history books will mark it down that each and every one of us in this House was here. And our grandchildren will be asking you, what did you do on D-Day? The stakes are incredibly high, Mr. Speaker, which is why I have championed this referendum, not because I wanted to, because all this does is create a headache for me going into an election. You know what my advisors told me? Stay out of it, Kenneth. Keep your head low. Get reelected. You know who's going to bet the benefit of cruise tourism? The members from West Bay. And it surprises me, Mr. Speaker, some of those members are the same ones are trying to prevent this. Oh, we will get to that. We will get to it. Mr. Speaker, I've championed this referendum not as a decision for the Parliament to make in isolation, but as an opportunity for the people to be involved and give us their feel, their appetite, what they want. Nobody ever asks us any questions about what we're doing to amend and improve financial services. We're trying to amend and sustain the cruise tourism industry. Those generational Caymanians that we talk about, let's protect them. With that being said, Mr. Speaker, I want to reiterate that the referendum is not about building a pier tomorrow. It's about giving Caymanians the power to shape their own destiny, because they have a right. If everybody says no, then we have to figure out what we're going to do about those dire circumstances I just mentioned before. But if I know my people well, what like they say, good old Caymanian common sense, I know will prevail in this referendum. Because my people aren't stupid. They recognize they have been the ones to adapt over time, and that's why we have been so successful. And I know that they're not going to be fooled by the nonsense that many people try to display out in the community. You take my people for idiots, trust me, they're going to show all in the wrong. Wait till the results come in. And that's why it pains me, Mr. Speaker, when I hear some members claiming that allowing this vote is too contentious. Mr. Speaker, what could be more contentious than denying the people their democratic right to be heard? Constitutionally protected. constitutionally protected their opportunity to be heard by the pen. You're talking about too controversial? Telling people they can't have their say, that's controversial. Mr. Speaker, I'll now turn my attention to the second matter of national importance, which is whether a national lottery should be legalized in these islands. And as I've said before, Mr. Speaker, I will spare this honorable House from repeating all of the previous debates on this subject, but for the benefit of the listening public, I'd like to briefly explain why this question is on the ballot for the people's consideration. And that is because this government believes that it's time to confront the long-standing issue that affects both public safety and societal fairness. Let me say that again. An issue that both affects public safety and societal fairness. Because we're going to dive into that a little bit, Mr. Speaker. In the early part of the PAC administration, I recall the former police commissioner raising serious concerns about the rise in criminality linked to illegal gambling, particularly the numbers game, as we call it here in Cayman. Since then, robberies, assaults, and other violent crimes have surged around this unlawful activity, and tragically, a loss of life. And apparently, it was connected to illegal numbers on the premises where it was sold. My heart still goes out for the family that lost their loved one. While the law enforcement proposed increasing the penalties for illegal gambling, to us, the government at that time, to deter the rise in crime, the government chose not to go down that path without first considering another solution: the introduction of a national lottery within our islands. The government had recognized, Mr. Speaker, and I think, Mr. Speaker, you were a member on the floor of this House at that time and gave your contributions, which were, I think, were spot on, by the way. The government had recognized, Mr. Speaker, that the attitude towards gambling had shifted significantly over the years since the law was created many, many decades ago. People from all walks of life, even the upstanding members of our society, were known to buy numbers, as it seemed to be harmless pastime. As the member from West Bay West said, even those in church. None of them in my church be buying no numbers, though, you know, maybe your church. What was once considered to be a taboo is now so culturally ingrained that the existing laws prohibiting gambling are often viewed as unfair and ineffective. Not to mention the ongoing double standard, which allows some games of chance while outlawing others. So why then would we not consider creating a national lottery? So let me go a little deeper, Mr. Speaker, about outlawing the others. And I know the very creative legal drafters of raffles and legal drafting for raffles compared to illegal gambling tickets. In my humble opinion, I'll say this again and again, they all mean the same thing. You ask anybody who has faith in the Lord, it's still a game of chance. So what we have done, Mr. Speaker, is decided which ones are legal. And the basis upon which we always thought we shouldn't have it is because of our Christian faith. Some of our good standing citizens of faith finds it as an insult to think that you can do raffles for nonprofits and make that legal, but make numbers illegal, because they see it both the same way. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, that's why we decided to say at that time, under that premier, the Honourable Member for Newlands, we decided to say, stop. We understand the Police Commissioner's viewpoint. We got to get a handle on this. But maybe we should ask the people first. By asking Caymanians directly whether they support a national lottery, the government is seeking to not only test the veracity of the cultural shift, but also to put a framework in place that would be totally legal and create an additional revenue stream for our country. Legalizing a national lottery will provide a legitimate, regulated alternative to the black market regime that is currently there, thereby reducing the criminality associated with the illegal numbers game, Mr. Speaker. And the proceeds from ticket sales could legitimately be used to benefit the entire country, rather than potentially fueling an underground crime network. Well, beyond reducing criminal activity, the revenue generated from a national lottery could be directed at a myriad of positive causes, Mr. Speaker. Now we know around the world, lottery proceeds are typically channeled to things like education and sports. But there's no reason why we had to limit it to that use and use it in other areas. For example, Mr. Speaker, just last month, oh no, not last month, 2 months now, the member of Bontown West proposed increasing fees on foreign-owned landowners to address the mounting health care liabilities of our people. So he was trying to find a new revenue stream. Mr. Speaker, a well-run national lottery could help provide for an alternative source of funding to provide affordable health care. And there's so many seniors in this country who don't have health care. And NEU, Department of Financial Assistance, have to take care of them. And those who don't qualify for NEU, who get in their pension, practically the whole pension got paid for their health care because the health care cost is so expensive. This is the way we can reduce the cost for our people who are going into retirement, who are worried about whether or not they're going to be able to afford health care. That's why everybody wants to get into the civil service. So what about those ones who are not in the civil service? They only get $1,200 a month. $1,200 sometimes is your light bill cost, much as your food and your insurance. This is just one example, Mr. Speaker, but the possibilities are vast, and the benefits could be transformative. Conversely, Mr. Speaker, if the people reject the idea of a national lottery, then the next administration will likely have no choice but to significantly increase the penalties and potentially custodial sentences for illegal gambling. And the reason for that, it would be to deter the level of criminality associated with it. We could be accused of not doing something about a criminal activity, and our justification was, Commissioner, hold off one little bit, please. Maybe we can fix this problem by allowing it to be regulated properly. And if we don't do this referendum, we'll never get the answer. And I know the former premier knows exactly what we're talking about. But some people would rather just increase the penalties and lock them up. In a sense, we are faced, Mr. Speaker, with an either or scenario. And the referendum bill will give Caymanians the opportunity to choose the path moving forward. And Mr. Speaker, I want to pause here for a second to say, all the conversations thus far for this referendum has been about cruise. Time to give this referendum a little bit more attention on the other subject matters too. Right? Because it's not only about cruise. For those who don't like it, you have your democratic right to go and vote and say no. That's what democracy is about. Check section 69 of the Constitution. It's either legalize and regulate gambling through a national lottery or accept tougher enforcement measures against illegal gambling, which should not be limited to just increasing the fines, but would very likely include custodial sentences, Mr. Speaker. That's the advice that we got, and those members who left this administration were there when we were advised of it. And good, Mr. Speaker, I know your government at the time were posed with quite similar presentations about the matter. So, Mr. Speaker, I think we should allow the people their choice, and it's their voice that should determine the direction that we take. That is a tool and an instrument that the Constitution gives us by way of referendum. And yes, it's controversial, but if a matter is controversial, isn't that the reason why we have the referendum in the Constitution in the first place? As with the previous question, Mr. Speaker, this subject was heavily ventilated by the former Premier and member for Newlands. And I must say, he did an excellent job of explaining the difference between the two when the issue was last debated. Oh, Mr. Speaker, I turned over the page, didn't realize I didn't go into the other topic yet. Forgive me, let me go back. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the third and final matter of the referendum ballot, as it focuses on whether the consumption and possession of small amounts of cannabis should be decriminalized. And I want to take a little more time to address this topic, because there has been a great deal of misunderstanding, whether deliberately, for political gain, or simply from naivety, about the question on cannabis and what it's truly about. So let me be absolutely clear, Mr. Speaker. This question is not about legalizing ganja. It's about decriminalizing small amounts that are used for your personal use. It's about the record that the courthouse keeps if you are convicted, because if this was to be passed, it will still be illegal. The police can still arrest you. They can still lock you up. What we're trying to fix in this matter, Mr. Speaker, is the record that is kept that is harming people's lives, and I'll explain how. There is a significant difference between the two concepts of decriminalizing, and I want to ensure decriminalizing and legalizing, and I want to ensure the public and inform them to make sure that they fully and clearly understand what the difference is. As with the previous questions, Mr. Speaker, this subject was heavily ventilated by our former Premier and member for Newlands, who I must say did an excellent job of explaining the difference between the two when the issue was last debated. I had to go through the notes all over again to make sure that he did a clear job. And if persons want to go back to that understanding, if you don't trust me and you're a fan of Mr. Panton and you find him more believable, you can go back to the recording and see where he explained it and did a very good job as to the reasons to support it. Right, good member? Okay. But just for the record again today, Mr. Speaker, I will repeat that legalization means making something entirely lawful, while decriminalization simply means making it not something that can be noted on your record in the court. Two different things. The primary reason this government is asking the people to consider decriminalization is because more and more we're seeing the devastating impacts of a criminal record on our people that do it for recreational use, and what it can have on a person's life. Once someone is convicted, their opportunities for education, employment, travel are severely curtailed and limited. And it can even affect something as critical as an emergency medical evacuation. Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker, if the doctor said to you, you have a serious problem and the only place that you can get that help is the United States, and you will die within 48 hours. And you just so happen to have smoked some weed when you were 21. Someone, sorry, Mr. Speaker, someone, not you. I know you're not, sorry. But someone had smoked some marijuana at age 21, and they could not get to the United States because they smoked marijuana at 21. And they die. That's what we're trying to resolve. We're not here trying to push marijuana consumption. Matter of fact, if the good people of the country and the Lord allows for this member to be a part of the next government, I intend to propose the penalties be increased, the fines be increased, but change it that it doesn't go on their record. Because they are getting a little bit disrespectful by smoking it everywhere you go. That's a bit too much. But we cannot afford to make it put us that far back. Check this out, Mr. Speaker. A foreigner can come here from a country where it's not a criminal record, and you know as they go, when they come in for a job in Cayman, you need to get a police record from where you were. You can't use a police record in Cayman until you've been here at least 6 months. Right, Mr. Smith? So they bring the criminal record from the United States where it's not a criminal offense. They go to an employer and say, hire me, while the Caymanian, who's exactly in the same position, can't get the job because he had a criminal record on marijuana. You tell me that fair? That's what we're trying to change, Mr. Speaker. Fairness. I mean, we're here to protect our people. Anyway, let me continue on script, Mr. Speaker, because I'm already going off. But just for the record again today, Mr. Speaker, I will repeat that the legislation, this legalization means that something is entirely lawful, and that's not what we're trying to do. The primary reason this government is asking the people to consider decriminalization because it has some serious devastating impacts on their life. As you are aware, Mr. Speaker, of how difficult it can be for airlift for a person to the United States for life-saving medical treatment. If they have a criminal record for cannabis possession, doesn't matter how sick they are, whether they're going to die or not, authorities in the United States are reluctant to issue visas to individuals with criminal records, regardless of their circumstances. And I dare say, Mr. Speaker, with Donald Trump's administration, it will become even harder, as we can tell and see by all the deportations that we're seeing out of the United States now. So this matter is only going to get worse. We cannot continue to allow something that is increasingly treated as a misdemeanor around the world to so blatantly ruin the lives of our people. Matter of fact, you know something, Mr. Speaker? Make money out of it. You want to smoke weed? We're going to fine you. Catch you with a spliff, $3,000. But don't ruin their life. Because that's what it does. Can't pay it? Go walk it off. Go paint the sidewalks. I am sure we have all heard of the concerns from our people about unscrupulous employers who look at any excuse under the sun to avoid hiring Caymanians. By keeping cannabis possession as a part of the criminal offense, we are handing these employers yet another tool to discriminate against our people. That's what we're doing. Rather than helping our Caymanians to get jobs, we're supposed to be taking the hurdles out of the way. Why should someone's future be derailed because of recreational use of cannabis when in many other countries, and I'm not saying we follow everybody, but the global circumstances do affect the Cayman Islands. When many other countries, it is considered to be no more serious than a speeding ticket, Mr. Speaker. Yet when applying for a job, the first thing they ask you for is a criminal record. But nowhere did they ever ask you for a speeding ticket. They don't say, give me your traffic record. Well, I guess if you're going to be a bus driver, they'll ask you for your traffic record, or your taxi driver, or so forth. But that's probably 2% of the working opportunities in the Cayman Islands. To put it plainly, Mr. Speaker, this proposal is seeking to treat the possession of small amounts of cannabis in the same way that we treat traffic offenses. Driving without insurance is illegal, but it's not criminal. Speeding is illegal, but it's not criminal. So what I'm saying is, what we're trying to say is that if you're caught with small amounts of marijuana, that it's still illegal, but it won't go on your criminal record. That's what we're trying to accomplish. So for those persons, particularly in Georgetown Central, who are going around telling my old people, Kenneth trying to legalize marijuana, it's not true. Stop lying to the people, because those same seniors, grandchildren or children, lives is who I'm trying to protect. But tell you what, the good news is my old people now is foolish. They think they got to come better than that. They got to come better than that. If you are caught, you will pay a fine, but your life will not be turned upside down by a criminal record, Mr. Speaker. And I say again, Mr. Speaker, this question is not about making marijuana legal. It's about ensuring that a person, particularly our young people, that is caught with a small amount of cannabis doesn't have to have their future destroyed because of a simple mistake. Should they be fined? Sure. Should they be held accountable? Absolutely. That's how you learn. But do they deserve a criminal record that prevents them from getting a job, furthering their education, traveling abroad, or accessing emergency care to save their life? No. No, Mr. Speaker, definitely not. That is not justice. It is a controversy. This question isn't important as the other ones because it's about fairness, Mr. Speaker. Common sense, which is what got Cayman where it is. We know the facts. Nobody is saying to allow these guys to be burning weed. I got plenty of friends say, man, come on, straighten up your life. But it's not different than alcohol. Anybody put in a legislation to stop the alcoholics who sit on the side of the road and drunk all the time? They're not criminal. They're not criminally ruined by their life. They can go get sober and get themselves back on track. Come on, man. Let's be practical about how we see these things. And I believe my people know better. And I know that when this vote goes to Parliament, goes to the referendum, I know that they will hear our voices in this House and they say, you know what? We need to change that. Cayman has been successful because of good Cayman common sense. We're practical people. But they're getting confused by people out there who like to lie because they have their own agenda. Don't do that to the country.
Honourable Minister, I've let it go a couple of times, but the use of the word lie or liar is unparliamentary. Say untruthful or something like that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wasn't talking about no member in this House, but you're right. I will not use the word lie again. That was the last time I'm going to use it. I've been advised that the appropriate terminology is economic with the truth, in my opinion at least. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that. You see, can I say this? I know you've announced that you are not running again, Mr. Speaker, but this honorable house will be missing your great knowledge. And not to undermine the other member, but I think you should reconsider, because why is he trying to come inside here with no knowledge at all? I'm worried about the future. We might have had our differences, but where you go in your head to help guide this country, I haven't got half of it yet. I'm still trying to give me some, but you don't want to give me no more. Well, I'll tell you one thing, Mr. Speaker. I may not have half of what you got, but I got 100% more than some of those I see coming. Maybe you should reconsider, Mr. Speaker. The House needs you. Mr. Speaker, the question is an important one because it's about fairness and common sense and protecting the people's future. And I want to make it clear as possible that this question should be put to the people. If they agree, and the answer is yes, then we can look at the quantities and the fines and the change in the laws. Now, some people are saying, well, how much is small? Mr. Speaker, that's why we have professionals for. I'm not going to put in a quantity because I don't know what a quantity amount is. I'm not a professional. You can talk to the medical providers as well as the enforcement senior members, which would be the police commissioner. Because, like I gave an example on the radio today, Mr. Speaker, when a police officer catches a criminal with marijuana, they decide what kind of offenses they're going to hold them. And it depends on the circumstances. So if they catch them with marijuana and it's 10 pounds of weed on a boat, chances are they're going to be caught and charged with importation. Because you're not smoking 10 pounds for yourself. So it's importation and intent to supply. That's the charge. Now, well, I don't know. I don't know who smokes that much more. But my point is this. The circumstances can be guided from the police, because the police will also, in another circumstance, catch somebody with 2 marijuana spliffs that they have on their possession. Now, it's not logical to say that this person is supplying. They will say, you're charged with consumption and possession. Now, that person is obviously using it for their personal use. But whatever determination that the prosecution's office and the police say what number did they have to get to, what amount did they have to get to before they say, you know what, this is with their recommendation. Let the police guide us. That's why we have the amount. So if the police say, okay, if you're going to go down this route of decriminalization, the maximum that we think, based on our years of experience in seeing the criminal element, before you decide to make it not on your record, maximum amount is 3 ganja spliffs, if that's what is normally the practice. And you take their guidance. So when people say, well, how much is a small amount? I don't know, I don't smoke weed. But the police commissioner can guide us. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, time to move on. Mr. Speaker, I want to get to this point about the referendum being controversial. Mr. Speaker, even as I stand here making my contribution, explaining the issues, I have no idea whether this bill is going to receive safe passage through this Honorable House, or whether it will be tossed aside yet again. And the reason for that is because it has been labeled controversial. Controversial, Mr. Speaker? Really? The whole purpose of a referendum is to give the people an opportunity to weigh in and have their say on controversial matters that affect their life. That's why I didn't understand the concept. Like, hold on. How can you say something that giving the people the right to have their say be controversial? It is a tool for determining complex issues, because if there was a clear direction on the way forward, then we wouldn't need the referendum. So if everybody knew exactly how the people felt about this marijuana situation, we wouldn't need to go to a referendum, unless everybody in here is quite clear to say that they're willing to decriminalize it right now. Well, because we don't know, that's why we ask the people. Mr. Speaker, we're not making decisions on behalf of ourselves. We're making decisions on behalf of the people, and we believe that they should have their say in respect to these things. I understand that there will be some people who are for these issues and some people who are against the issues, Mr. Speaker. But what I want people to recognize is that this is about having your right to choose, not about the specific issue themselves. I don't know what the majority is going to say either way. But having the opportunity to influence these decisions that affect your lives is what I'm fighting for. This is democracy itself in action. And if we as legislators are not prepared to give that opportunity via a referendum when we have contentious issues, we might as well take it out of the Constitution, period. It makes no sense having this provision within the Constitution if we're not prepared to use it. So, Mr. Speaker, in my view, it's not the referendum that is controversial or contentious. What is truly controversial is the relentless efforts by some members who seem hell-bent on derailing this referendum and robbing the Caymanian people of their democratic right to vote on these matters of national importance. And why is that, Mr. Speaker? Because it serves their interests and not the people's interests? Let's be honest, Mr. Speaker. Some members in this House don't want this referendum because it would force them to take a side on the issues. Instead, they want to ride both sides of the fence, hoping to please everybody, whispering yes to one group and then whispering no to the other group. Mr. Speaker, you remember the day when you delivered your speech as the Honorable Premier, and you said, the member from Georgetown Central, the infamous fence rider. That's what you said to me. Never forget the quote. Remember? So, Mr. Speaker, I'm familiar with this area of expertise. Very familiar with it. So, Mr. Speaker, forgive me, Mr. Speaker, let me drink some water. But, Mr. Speaker, the experience has allowed me to easily identify it, and I've learned from it. Mr. Speaker, what do you call that type of behavior? Having your cake and eat it too? Wanting it both ways? Speaking out two sides of your mouth? I don't know, Mr. Speaker. But one thing I am certain of is that we are in silly season. And speaking out of both sides of your mouth is a common thing. So nothing surprises me when it comes to this type of behavior. Sometimes I wonder if people forget that we live in a small little island, Mr. Speaker, and people talk. I've heard the conversations of some members, particularly those who are part of government. I've heard the conversation with some members behind closed doors with people from both sides of the debate. They come back and they tell us, oh, they're not for it. And then the other group come back and they say, yeah, but they tell us they're for it. And I challenge those members, if they have taken a position in private, then they should have the courage to say so in public. WhatsApp chats and quiet phone calls are no substitute for honesty of this House. Tell one group they want a pair, and then they tell the other group they don't want a pair. Level of deceitfulness. I can't say that they lie in because it's against parliamentary proceedings. So I won't say it. Oh, there's a lot of words today I learned and I can't use. Mr. Speaker, for the record, I withdraw the words deceitfulness. Continue on, Mr. Speaker. These issues, cruise berthing, gambling, and cannabis, are all affecting real lives. People's lives are affected by it. This is no time for ambiguity or playing political games, because people's lives are being affected and are at stake. Controversial, they say. What could be more controversial than promising the people to hold a referendum and then snatching it away from them at the last minute? I can't say what I want to call that. Let's not forget the people have been down this road before. And I know you will remember, Mr. Speaker. You had the question set. You set the date. Public holiday set. They even got a free holiday out of it. Expecting to go and vote. And what happened? Nothing. Granted, it wasn't the politicians that did that. It wasn't the former government that did that, that stopped it the last time. But the point is, here we are again down the same road with the questions set, date, set again. Will it be the politicians this time that stop it? We will find out today. Because that, Mr. Speaker, will be the ultimate controversy. The next thing I want to address is the public awareness. Because I expect some people are going to say that there is no education campaign and that people don't have enough time to make an informed decision. Well, let's look at that argument a little bit more closely, Mr. Speaker. The reason why there hasn't been an education campaign is quite simple. It's because we still don't know whether we're going to have a referendum or not. How can the government start a $100,000 campaign on something that may not even happen? How? If the bill is not passed, then there will be no referendum and the members will start complaining about that too. They'll say, well, you spent all that money. And no, you should have waited till after the referendum done. So you can't, you see, they're using opportunistic circumstances to fight the fight. They know I can't go out there and do that because they're gonna accuse me of things. But I'm not falling for that trap. Here we go. Let's examine it a little bit further. If we had started the campaign prematurely, those members would be the first to accuse the government of wasting public funds. Once again, Mr. Speaker, they want it both ways. Speaking out of two sides of the mouth at its finest. And as for the concerns about the timing, let's put that one into context too. In just a few weeks, we will be asking the people to elect 19 representatives to run this country, control $1 billion budget, and steer the direction of this country for the next 4 years. But we can't ask them to deal with a matter we've been talking about for decades. Here we go. Some of the candidates haven't even been declared yet. And the electorate has no idea what they stand for, who they're running with, or what we're going to do. But they're going to have enough time to figure that one out. Meanwhile, Mr. Speaker, the country has been debating on the cruise berthing issue for 20 years. You mean to tell me the people don't know whether they want it or not yet? Are we seriously expected to believe that our people need more time to understand that issue? Or is it because the people here try to nitpick, to put confusion in the minds of my people? Caymanians, you are smarter than that. Do not make them fool you. It's simple. Do we want to be in cruise or not? We have to build it. Just like Mr. Berkeley Bush built that dock out there where we bring in our cargo today. The poor man got voted out for doing the right thing. That's why we don't want to do it that way. We want you to see and understand it for yourself and support the government to build it. That's democracy. So let me get this straight, Mr. Speaker. They can pick 19 members in a few short weeks with limited information of who they are, what they stand for, but we can't answer 3 referendum questions on issues that we've been hearing about for decades. That's what we're saying. Ah, boy, Mr. Speaker. We got to ask the question, who's funding the campaigns? Then you'll find the answer. Mr. Speaker, make it make sense. Please make it make sense. I'm a very practical young man. I like to still think I'm young. I'm practical. I'm a straightforward person. I can't lie very good because my emotions, I wear them on my sleeve. But this is nonsense, man. When are we going to stop doing this to our people? But it doesn't stop there, Mr. Speaker. I wish it did. Because another objection I will hear for not supporting this bill is because some members only supported the referendum because they were bound by collective responsibility. But not because they believed in democracy.
Honourable Minister, just an inquiry. Are you going to be much longer?
Mr. Speaker, I have at least probably about half an hour to 45 minutes.
I think I would hear some complaints about stomachs and so forth.
Yes, sir.
So if this is a convenient time, we'll take the lunch on suspension. I want to remind members that of the Standing Orders Committee meeting, which I called for lunch today. If we can have our lunch and assemble about 1:30 in the big committee room, we can have the presentation done then. And depending on how many questions members have, we should be able to get through it in an hour. So I'm in your hands in that respect. But if everyone would please cooperate, eat swiftly and assemble at 1:30. Thank you. The Houses will now take the lunch on suspension. We'll return on completion of the presentation to the Standing Orders Committee.